we can look into that for you really quick. I'm not sure about Google Docs. I think that it does. I'm just not sure how well it works. I think it depends on the computer that you're using and the browser that you're using. So let's take a look. Let's see what we can learn about that here. So the question was, if I don't have Microsoft and I only have Apple's version, Apple's Office software, which is I think called Keynote. Can I record my presentation? And I think you can in both of those. So let's take a look here. We'll look at Google's version first. So to go to Google Docs, you go to drive.google.com. And if you have an account, then you can just sign into it. If you don't have an account, you'll have to make an account. And then I have to remember my password, which I'm not entirely sure I remember. But we'll try it anyway. Apparently that's not it. That's not it either. I can't remember the password to this thing. So they do have a record slideshow button on Google Docs. On Pages. Okay, so that's what I was going to do next. I was just going to search Keynote, record, and usually you can find out, yeah, so right here it says that you can record Keynote presentation. Lots of ways to do that, lots of videos on how to do that. That's not terribly difficult. Apple's software is pretty easy to use, and it's pretty comparable in abilities to Microsoft's. Yeah, and you can go ahead and send that to me as a Keynote presentation. I believe I have that software on my computer, so it shouldn't be a problem. And yeah, any other questions at all? Yeah, I mean, you may have more than one slide when it comes to your background or your design or whatever else you're testing. You may have more than one slide in those sections. Usually in the heart of your presentation, in the kind of the middle of the presentation where all the information is about what you're presenting on, usually you'll have more than one slide for each one of those, because you'll have more images, you'll have more information, you'll maybe have some graphs or some charts or something like this, some data, and analysis of what you've done. But yeah, that's pretty much right. The beginning and the end, you usually have one slide for each of those things, and then the middle has more. That's about right. And it looks like right here, I just looked it up on Google. You can, it seems, do a narration over your Google Slides. So in Google Docs, they call it Google Slides, is the software that you can make a presentation with. And they have lots of different YouTube videos and other websites on how to record your presentation with your voice and with the slides going and everything else. So it can be done in all three of those. And it's a very useful feature. And I would recommend after you've done the recording that you test it, that you play it, make sure it works just like you want it to. Time it. You want it to be between 10 and 15 minutes. You don't want it to be 5 minutes and be done. If it's 5 minutes, you're probably not getting enough information out to your audience. If it's 10 minutes, you're in good shape. If you're going over 15 minutes, you're probably just taking a little too long to talk about things. You need to cut some things down or find a better way to talk about them. Well, about 10 to 15, between 10 and 15 minutes. And the reason that we go from 10 to 15 minutes is because the reason we go 10 to 15 minutes is that at most engineering conferences where engineers are giving presentations about projects that they're doing, they're usually limited to 12 minutes is their length that they're allowed to talk. And then the last 3 minutes of their 15-minute time session is open for questions. And I want you to get used to or have some experience relaying information in a short amount of time using the tools of a presentation program. The purpose of the presentation program is to allow you to get a lot of information to your audience in a very short time without overloading them with just words on a page or words out of your mouth. So when it comes down to it, it means images and lists of things. So lists of things combined with images can help people to see a lot of things at once, understand a lot of things at once, and to remember a lot of things at once. If you do too many words, it hampers the brain's ability to remember things. If you do just images, that also causes problems. So you want to have a mixture of both that work together to get the information to your audience. Any other questions, concerns? Okay. Well, let's do this very last day here. Let's do a, did I play for you guys PowerPoint, the crazy funny PowerPoint video yet? Yeah, did I play that one for you? Okay. Well, you can say me since you're the only one that watches this live. Just you and me. Anyway, so what I would like to do now, did I show you anything from Bill Gates or from Steve Jobs? Okay. Let's look at some of Bill Gates' presentations. You know who Bill Gates is, right? Okay, well, Bill Gates, of course, is the founder of Microsoft and Windows, and he also actually was one of the original engineers that worked for Apple at the very beginning of Apple Computer. When Apple Computer started, they built their first home computer in a garage, and Bill Gates helped them to write the software for that computer, the operating system and the accompanying software. And then he also wrote or helped write software for their subsequent computers all the way up until the Macintosh was introduced. And he helped them write the software for the Macintosh. The Macintosh operating system was actually purchased from Xerox, the copy machine company, and then it was reworked to work in the computer environment that they were designing in the Macintosh. And that's where they got the idea of using a mouse and a graphical user interface like the Windows that we use today in computers. That Windows idea was originally a Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, all these other guys that were working for Apple at the time. They came up with this idea from Xerox's idea and perfected it into a program. And then Bill Gates went off and wrote his own, because he wasn't technically an employee of Apple or an owner of Apple. He was just being hired to do this, so he went off and started his own company and built a new program based on the same ideas, and became a multi-gazillionaire and been probably one of the most influential people in all of computerdom. without a doubt. The one thing Bill Gates was never very good at, though, is presenting to people, presenting things to people. And let me show you why. You can actually see a lot of the why here. When he gives presentations and he uses a presentation platform, you can see that he does a lot of stuff on his slides. Way too much stuff on his slides. For example, here's a classic slide of Bill Gates. You've got so much stuff you cannot even read what's on this page. And it's so many shapes and so many colors and so many everything else. You have no idea what he's talking about by looking at this page. No idea. You would have to actually be there from the beginning and take all the steps through this big old mess to understand what he's talking about. Here's another example, right? You can maybe get a little bit of an idea, but only because we're so used to cloud computing that we understand these clouds now mean some cloud computing something. But, I mean, it just goes on and on and on. He has all kinds of things that he does with these presentations that are just too much, just a little over the top. And he's always been a kind of a computer programmer, not so much a let's present this to the world kind of guy. Let me look at one more. There's one more that's my absolute favorite. He actually once did a presentation that was so complicated that he crashed his brand new Windows 7 computer, or Windows 2000 computer. I can't remember. It was either 2000 or Windows 7, one of the two. But it was so bad, he absolutely crashed his computer live and came up with the blue screen of death and everything. It was incredible. And it was really embarrassing for him. Now, a lot of people like to say, well, that happened to Steve Jobs as well. I'm looking for when that happened. And it's true. Steve Jobs had a problem in one of his presentations as well, more than one actually. They've all had problems in presentations. But Steve Jobs' problems with presentation usually are not the fact that his presentation wasn't good. It's usually a hardware issue. The last one I remember was when he was doing something with one of the new iPhones, and there were so many people in the audience that were using Wi-Fi to create their own Wi-Fi. So they were taking in 3G and creating their own Wi-Fi networks. So many nerds in the audience that there was too much radio interference in the building for them to actually do anything. Everybody's network was interfering with everyone else's. I think they estimated they had something like 400 independent networks in the room at the time. So it was kind of crazy. It was just overloading the system because so many people were online. But the point is that giving a presentation is a very fine balance. Bill Gates wanted to say a lot of things, so he just thought he needed to put a lot of things on the screen. But it's not actually necessary to put a lot of things on the screen when you need to say something important or just say a lot of things. So, did I play this one for you, the iPhone presentation? Let's go ahead and do this. This one is one of the best presentations ever given. Now, this is not a technical presentation at first. It gets technical later. But let's take a look at this. Many of the lessons are still worth learning. What's going on with the sound here? Why do I have no sound? Oh, there we go. Now I have sound. Okay. So notice, first of all, that Steve Jobs comes in and he doesn't necessarily talk right away. He's just walking on the stage. And that is actually an important part of presenting. Leaving yourself some quiet space for people to think every once in a while. Now, at the beginning of a presentation, not always necessary. Steve Jobs is going for the emotional effect here. He's got the great big Apple logo up there. He's got this backlit thing behind it. It's very dramatic. So he's going for drama here. But also notice the way he's dressed. He's dressed in jeans. He's dressed in a dark, like shirt of some kind, like a mock turtleneck shirt or something. He's dressed pretty casually. And that's totally fine for the audience that he's speaking to. He's speaking to a bunch of computer developers and programmers and hardware junkies and nerds. And most of these guys spend most of their day, without any pants on in their kitchen sitting at a computer working from home. That's fine. You can dress in jeans and a t-shirt when you're addressing computer nerds. You just can. It's just accepted. You go to most of these big computer companies these days, and that's how people are dressed all around the office. Sometimes they're dressed in a bathrobe in their office if they're into office that day. So it's a very relaxed culture, and that's allowed. Engineers, on the other hand, have a little bit different expectation and a lot different audiences. How many different kinds of audiences might an engineer give a presentation to in the course of their job? Can you think of different types of audiences engineers might have to speak to? Okay, so the client, essentially, right? Whoever it is that you're doing the work for, you might need to talk to them. In fact, you'll definitely need to talk to them at some point. You'll have to talk to them at the beginning of the project to figure out what it is. You'll have to talk to them throughout the project to get information from them. And when you're done with the project, or close to being done with the project, or done with the design before you start testing it, you're going to have to go to them and present to them what you've done. Now, when you're talking to clients that may be giving you thousands or hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars, how do you think you should dress? Probably like $1 million, right? So if you're doing a job that's worth thousands of dollars or hundreds of dollars, you maybe don't have to dress like $1 million. But if you're giving a presentation to a company that is giving you millions of dollars, you had better dress the part. And if you don't, they're not going to be impressed, because people that give that kind of money want to be impressed not only by what you've done, but by how you present it. So you have to dress to your audience. The client is one of the audiences that engineers address. What other kind of audiences might an engineer have to address? Okay, very often engineers have to address the public. When they're doing public projects, when something goes wrong in a public project, when they're trying to convince people to pay for a public project, so on and so forth, right? So they're often talking to the public. Also, engineers are often explaining to the public things that are happening in technology around them. Things, for example, when the big earthquake hit Fukushima in Japan, engineers were constantly talking to the public about the safety issues, the dangers, what actually happened at the Fukushima power plants, the nuclear power plants, and so on and so forth. They also talked about the tsunami itself. So engineers are often addressing the public. Now, when you're an engineer addressing the public, it might depend who you're speaking with. If you're speaking with a few politicians almost always dress a little bit more nicely than other people around them, so you might have to dress a little more nicely. But if you're speaking with a group of construction workers or a group of technicians, and you're all addressing the public, you might be able to dress down a little bit to a little more relaxed level. Any other groups you can think of? Politicians, absolutely. Dress nice for politicians. There's another group also, and that is you're actually your own company. So engineers often have to take their ideas and their designs and proposals to their own company to get money, funding, time, resources, other people to join their team. So engineers have to address a lot of different audiences, and you have to address to the audience. You want to impress the audience that you're speaking with. Now, other engineers is another audience that engineers have to speak to, and that is a mixed thing. Some engineers will go to engineering conferences in jeans and a t-shirt. Some of them will go in three-piece suits. And so that's kind of weird because engineers are just weird that way. But anyway, how you look is important. Let's move on.
This is a day I've been looking forward to for 2.5 years.
Hold on a second, let me get it here. It's not showing because I didn't start it. Is it showing now? Okay.
Every once in a while, this is a day I've been looking forward to for 2.5 years. Every once in a while, a revolutionary product comes along that changes everything. And Apple has been, well, first of all, one's very fortunate if you get to work on just one of these in your career. Apple's been very fortunate. It's been able to introduce a few of these into the world. In 1984, we introduced the Macintosh. It didn't just change Apple, it changed the whole computer industry. In 2001, we introduced the first iPod. And it didn't just change the way we all listen to music. It changed the entire music industry. Well, today, we're introducing 3 revolutionary products in this case. The first one is a widescreen iPod with touch controls. The second is a revolutionary mobile phone. And the third is a breakthrough internet communications device.
Okay, so a couple of things here really quick. You notice that he's doing some background here. He's giving a little history. And he's introducing now these 3 things, and you notice that you probably recognize these icons on the screen. At the time, these people did not recognize that little green phone icon. That was a completely new thing that he actually introduced to them, and they didn't even know what it was going to be and how important it was going to be in their lives in the future. That little green phone icon everybody touches to answer their phone in the world now. And he introduced it as one of 3 devices. And this is a very clever way to get people interested in what you're doing. And this is a very common presentation tactic, where you give people a little taste of something at the beginning so that they get interested in what you're doing. And you can see they're obviously interested. You use your background, you use history, you use the interest of your audience, what they're looking for, to kind of draw them in, right?
So, 3 things: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communications device. An iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. an iPod, a phone. Are you getting it? These are not 3 separate devices. Going to reinvent the phone.
Okay, I'm going to skip forward a little
Here
bit.
it is.
Okay, so another classic thing done in presentations is just a little joke to make sure that you're not taking yourself too seriously, lighten up the mood a little bit, get people loosened up. It's very common for people to do this, but it's also common for people to overdo this. If you're going to have humor in your presentation, it shouldn't be constant humor, and it shouldn't be all the time, it shouldn't be regularly throughout your presentation. You know, humor in your presentation can be there, but try not to overdo it. I think 1 or 2 jokes during a presentation that last 10 minutes is more than enough. Otherwise, you're just kind of wasting time, and it should be related to what you're doing. It should be related to the experience that you had in your project, or related to the design in some way, or related to something related to the project. It shouldn't just be a random joke. That's the worst thing ever, is when somebody stands up and says, "Oh, I've just got a joke." You know, a rabbi and an engineer and somebody walk into a bar or whatever, and just like, why are you wasting our time with this? Unless it has something to do with the project in some way, don't do it. Visual jokes like this one are great ones. They're just a little difficult to do because you have to make the visual part work. But anyway, the point being is that humor is fine, just don't overdo it. It's very easy to lose your audience's attention and their, I guess, respect as well if you just waste time just telling joke after joke.
No. Actually, here it is, but we're going to leave it there for now. So
another thing that he did really well in his presentation is he actually brought one of the iPhones with him, and he demonstrated it later. We'll see that later.
before we get, and the problem is that they're not so smart in the one device, and they all have these plastic little keyboards on them. And the problem is that they're not so smart, and they're not so easy to use. So if you kind of make a Business School 101 graph of the smart axis and the easy to use axis, phones, regular cell phones are kind of right there. They're not so smart, and they're not so easy to use. But smartphones are definitely a little smarter, but they actually are harder to use. They're really complicated. Just for the basic stuff, people have a hard time figuring out how to use them. Well, we don't want to do either one of these things. What we want to do is make a leapfrog product that is way smarter than any mobile device has ever been and super easy to use. This is what iPhone is. Okay? So, we're going to reinvent the phone. Now, we're going to start with a revolutionary user interface. It is the result of years of research and development, and of course it's an interplay of hardware and software. Now, why do we need a revolutionary user interface? I mean, here's 4 smartphones, right? The Motorola Q, the BlackBerry, Palm Treo, Nokia E62, the usual suspects. And what's wrong with their user interfaces? Well, the problem with them is really sort of in the bottom 40 there. It's this stuff right here. They all have these keyboards that are there whether you need them or not to be there. And they all have these control buttons that are fixed in plastic and are the same for every application. Well, every application wants a slightly different user interface, a slightly optimized set of buttons just for it. And what happens if you think of a great idea 6 months from now? You can't run around and add a button to these things. They're already shipped. So what do? It doesn't work because the buttons and the controls can't change. They can't change for each application, and they can't change down the road if you think of another great idea you want to add to this product. Well, how do you solve this? It turns out we have solved it. We solved it in computers 20 years ago. We solved it with a bitmap screen that could display anything we want, put any user interface up, and a pointing device. We solved it with the mouse, right? We solved this problem. So how are we going to take...
Okay, so this part is actually, it seems innocuous, but it's extremely important. Steve Jobs is here trying to explain to people what the thought process was behind the design of the iPhone. Why did we need the iPhone? To us now, it's obvious. To us now, it's totally obvious that applications are designed on this touchscreen. Oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's to be taken for granted. But back during the days of the early smartphones, it was not obvious. And if you ever used one of those early smartphones, they were terrible. It was worse than having nothing in your pocket. You'd rather just walk over and use a phone and a computer separately than use a smartphone. And so the thought process behind how we went from the old smartphones to the new smartphones we use today is very important. It's important to explain how this came about and the designing behind it. And that's exactly what he's doing here. He's saying, well, we're taking our design idea from the computer, but it's not going to be exactly the same as the computer. So let's watch some more.
Take this to a mobile device. And what we're going to do is get rid of all these buttons and just make a giant screen. A giant screen. Now, how are we going to communicate this? We don't want to carry around a mouse, right? So what are we going to do? Oh, a stylus, right? We're going to use a stylus. No. Who wants a stylus? You have to get them and put them away and you lose them. Yuck. Nobody wants a stylus. So let's not use a stylus. We're going to use the best pointing device in the world. We're going to use a pointing device that we're all born with. We're born with 10 of them. We're going to use our fingers. We're going to touch this with our fingers. And we have invented a new technology called multi-touch, which is phenomenal. It works like magic. You don't need a stylus. It's far more accurate than any touch display that's ever been shipped. It ignores unintended touches. It's super smart. You can do multi-finger gestures on it. And boy, have we patented it. So we've been very lucky to have brought a few revolutionary user interfaces to the market in our time. First was the mouse. The second was the click wheel. And now we're going to bring multi-touch to the market. And each of these revolutionary user interfaces has made possible a revolutionary product. The Mac, the iPod, and now the iPhone. So, a revolutionary user interface. We're going to build on top of that with software. Now, software on mobile phones is like baby software. It's not so powerful. And today, we're going to show you a software breakthrough. Software that's at least 5 years ahead of what's on any other phone. Now, how do we do this? Well, we start with a strong foundation. iPhone runs OS 10. Now, why would we want to run such a sophisticated operating system on a mobile device? Well, because it's got everything we need. It's got multitasking. It's got the best networking. It already knows how to power manage. We've been doing this on mobile computers for years. It's got awesome security and to write apps. It's got everything from Cocoa and the graphics, and it's got core animation built in, and it's got the audio and video that OS X is famous for. It's got all the stuff we want, and it's built right in to iPhone. And that has let us create desktop-class applications and networking. Right? Not the crippled stuff that you find on most phones. This is real desktop-class applications. And you know, one of the pioneers of our industry, Alan Kay, has had a lot of great quotes throughout the years. And I ran across one of them recently that explains how we look at this. Explains why we go about doing things the way we do. Because we love software. And here's the quote. People who are really serious about software should make their own hardware. You know, Alan said this 30 years ago, and this is how we feel about it. And so we're bringing breakthrough software to a mobile device for the first time. It's 5 years ahead of anything on any other phone. The second thing we're doing is we're learning from the iPod, syncing with iTunes. You know, we're going to ship our 100 millionth iPod this year, and that's tens of millions of people that know how to sync these devices with their PCs or Mac and sync all of their media right on.
Okay, I want to get to a part where he uses. In this part, he's using imagery and text very well together, with arrows pointing to things on the image and changing the image around. Let's go to this part.
Now, we've also got some stuff you can't see. We've got 3 really advanced sensors built into this phone. The first one is a proximity sensor. It senses when physical objects get close. So when you bring iPhone up to your ear to take a phone call, it turns off the display and it turns off the touch sensor instantly. Why do you want to do that? Well, 1, to save battery, but 2, so you don't get spurious.
So there, you saw him using imagery with arrows and explanations. Here we see him using imagery with lists, right? So, and further on we'll see a lot more of that as well. Right here, for example, again. Right here we'll see imagery with a list. Notice that he doesn't have everything up here that he's going to say. He just has little subtitles. The killer app is making calls. Use contacts like never before. Visual voicemail. It doesn't say, this phone has a killer app, it is making calls that does this, and that. He's not writing down what he's going to say. He's just got little subtitles so that he knows what to touch on, what the next thing is. And then he talks about each of these things using 2 or 3 sentences. And the next presenter, he hands this over to another presenter here pretty soon. I'm assuming that it has it on this video, maybe not. But anyway, in the actual presentation, which is a little longer than this says, this 50-minute one, he hands it off to another presenter, and they're going to give more presentation about more of the technical aspects of the phone. Because these guys are computer geeks and they want to know more about the technical stuff. And their presentations are less, they have more information on the slides. They have charts, they have graphs, they have other things like that, and they have generally lists that are a little bit longer, a little more detailed, and imagery that's a little bit more detailed and complicated. And that is true for engineers as well. Engineers usually have diagrams and pictures and things that are a little more detailed, but they try to limit what they put on each slide to the amount of information that the brain can handle. So if you keep it between about 5 and 7 things on a list, that's, 7 is the absolute max. 4 is starting to get too few to waste a slide on. So between 5 and 7 usually things in any given list, 5 and 7 things written on a slide in words, and you want to keep the number of images on a slide is down low as well. 3 or less. You don't want to have a lot of images crowded on a slide. It starts to just get too much for the brain. I like to have 1 or 2. 3 is the absolute max, I think, for things for visual things on a slide. But usually you can get away with an image and a list. An image and a list. Maybe 2 images and 2 lists, but not much more than that. You usually don't need much more than that to get your point across. And usually when you're going with 2 images and 2 lists, you're comparing things. And you're showing people differences and similarities or whatever. There are a lot of things to consider when you're preparing a presentation and giving a presentation. And these are only some of the things to consider. The best thing to think about while you're doing a presentation is, am I coming across clearly with the information that I want to present? And do the slides represent that information with me speaking and without me speaking? Does it match up with me? So does it match up with what I want to present? People should be able to go through your presentation and understand kind of the basics of what you're going to talk about. Not know the details, but understand kind of where you're going and what you're talking about. So if you don't have enough information, they won't. understand that. If you have too much information, then people will know more of the details that you're going to explain, and they will lose more of those details because of memory loss. So you want to leave just enough. You want to put just enough on the slides to give people a start on the information, and then you will provide the rest. And that is all I have for you today. Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask? Okay. Well, finish up the presentation, get that turned in as soon as possible, and we will see you on Friday.